Alright, this is my new RS, finally arrived after 10 months. It shows the number 37, the first RS model in Australia. I'm not a cinematographer and I'm certainly not a social media influencer, but I do love cars, and I'd like to have a record of how I've screwed this thing together. My background is mechanical engineering, so hopefully I have some knowledge that I can impart, and it seems like a good opportunity to share what's involved in building one of these, or at least my experience is both good and bad. It might help anyone else who's considering building one or purchasing one, and you know, seems like a great opportunity to do it.
So if you're an international customer like me, you'll end up with a large crate in your front yard and you'll need to get it off the truck. So if you don't have a forklift, a higher crane works on the back of the truck, and the box is really well made, which is credited to Ultima, so there's no issue with damaging anything by hooking it up like this and getting it onto the ground. And once it's on the ground, you want to remove the side and then get all of your minor parts boxes out. Then take the top and the rest of it apart from the floor and what the chassis is sitting on. And then the best thing to do is, in my opinion, just unscrew the timbers that the chassis is sitting on. There's some foam protection there, and slide the body and chassis out as one piece on those timbers. You'll find your trolley actually sits just lower than the framing itself, and you can just sort of jostle it into position. Inviting your mates over for a few beers and getting them to give you a helping hand is a pretty good choice at this stage.
Alright, now you've got your car in your garage on its trolley. The first thing to do is take a few photos so you can show people what it actually looks like and why you didn't buy a 911 like a normal petrol head. Because the second step is to remove all of the panels, the rear clam, the side pods, the center section, and the front clip. I'd also recommend at this stage that you get all of your boxes that Ultima have delivered you and write a list of what's in each of them and get them all in order so that you can find out where something is if you need it, and also send that list back to Ultima so you can make sure that there hasn't been anything that's unfortunately been overlooked. Then what we're going to do is we're going to remove the rear clamshell first, the front clip, then move on to the side pods and then the center section. I've gone for a factory body pre-fit, which is not something that I expected to do or it even sort of accounted for in cost. It was quite expensive, but after chatting to other builders, it was a bit of a no-brainer. To start with, when it's shipped, obviously once all the panels are in the right location, there's no chance of them rubbing against each other and causing any damage. The second thing is that making sure all of these shut lines are correct is going to be pretty important to the way the car looks in the end. Then the next step is to run some tape at the joins so that when you put the body back on, you're going to have a good idea of where everything's meant to go and how it lines up. I've just used my Dymo label maker to print some labels that I can easily identify and just cut them with a Stanley knife so that I've got a pretty fine alignment line on it. The other thing which was recommended to me was for the rear clamshell to actually unbolt the mounts from the chassis rather than from the clam itself. It sort of makes sense to me that it's better to do that just because it's easy to get alignment. I'm also going to paint mark these bolts just so that I can see exactly where they were and where they go back. Obviously, if you change the depth at which this bolt sits in or out, it might look all fine down here, but when you get back up the top here, you're going to run into some alignment issues where you have some pretty tight lines to deal with, and it's that sort of thing that's very important, and it tends to be the type of thing where if you change one part in one direction, you'll pay for it right at the other end of the car. So it's something to be aware of. The factory have put in a few rivets in choice places to help with that alignment stuff. One thing to also be aware of is that they've also added spaces for alignment. So there's one here between this panel and the chassis itself. It's probably a bit difficult to see there. A couple of bits of aluminium. So whenever you're pulling the body panels, you need to be aware of where they all are and where they go back to. I'll be number marking them and then also taping them to the correct parts of the body so that I know exactly where they go back. Obviously getting in here, it looks nice from the outside, but there's not sort of much going on beneath. It's pretty much just a bare chassis at this stage. So I know we haven't really achieved much in the first video so far. It's just been sort of talking about it and having a look at the car and the way that it's on its chassis dolly, but we'll go into more in the next video about how we actually remove each of these pieces. As I say, failing plans, planning to fail. So make sure when you do remove this stuff that you have a good idea about where you're going to put these sections, because they're quite large and you don't want to damage them at all, obviously. My missus doesn't know that this front clip's actually going in our lounge room, so that'll be quite popular for several months. I'll just put a blanket over it, she won't even notice. But we'll go into all that sort of stuff as it sort of evolves. I want to keep these videos relatively short so people don't get too bored and there's an opportunity to ask questions that are sort of fairly specific to the stage that we're at. So yeah, drop some comments down there if you have any tips or you have any questions about the build. Obviously, I'll go into the costing and purchase experience or any tooling or anything like that if people are interested. Otherwise, I'll sort of just focus on what's required to actually build the car and what I've been doing.